Welcome everybody. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy diaries this morning. This is an inaugural event that Greyfly.ai have put on, and I feel extremely lucky to be able to introduce our panel, which I'll do in 1 second. But with leading practitioners from some of the leading companies in the UK today. I've been told I must first of all talk to you about some housekeeping rules. The attendee video and mic is disabled. However, as you can probably work out already, the chat and the raising hand is enabled, and similarly the Q&A is enabled. Do feel free to raise hands or raise chats or Q&As throughout the conversation. There will be time at the end set aside for Q&As, but depending on how we get on with time, I will introduce some of those Q&As as we go. I'm ably assisted by Sang today, and he tells me that he can put your individual mics on. So if there's a particular question, I may well ask Sang to switch your mic on so you can pose it to the panel directly. Like I said, time allowing. One last thing as well, there's a couple of short polls, both at the front end of the talk and at the back end of the talk. We're due to finish at 10:30 this morning, so hopefully you can stick around. I'm hopeful that we're building up to a big crescendo. So some really fascinating debate to be had. So if you've got your coffees ready, please sit back, make yourself comfortable, and we're going to dive in from now. So if we just start with the panel introducing themselves, and I'm just going to introduce them one at a time. First of all, Stuart from the BBC.
Morning everyone, and thank you Lloyd for inviting me to be a part of this. So just by way of a quick intro, I'm the Director of Transformation, Change and Improvement at the BBC. And what that means is I head up our major projects and corporate PMO, as well as our continuous improvement team. So I have responsibility over our critical projects portfolio, which we define as our sort of tier 1 strategically valuable and high risk projects. And so it's a small portfolio, and we'll come on to talk about that no doubt through the conversation, but it represents about £500 million worth of spend and about £1 billion worth of benefits, as well as non-financial benefits at any given time. So I'm interested in what we can do to improve the oversight of those projects and the understanding of risk.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm sure you said that was a small portfolio at 500 million. I guess it's all relative.
Small number of projects, I should have said.
Okay, sorry. Okay, thank you. Tim, over to you.
Yeah, morning, and again, thank you, Lloyd, for allowing me to join the panel on this interesting topic. My name's Tim Boland. I'm the VP for Project Delivery for DHL Supply Chain, which is part of the Deutsche Post Group. I run the project delivery function within the UK&I region. Typically about 100 people delivering circa 270, 280 projects a year, but interestingly for our customers, not that often actually for ourselves. So we do a small element of internal projects, but typically it's always for our customers implementing new services. In terms of size and scale portfolio, it ranges year to year, but it can be anywhere from 120 million to 750 million, depending on whether we're building new sheds or not.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tim. And Dave.
Yeah, morning everyone. My name's Dave Corbin. I head up the programme and project management team at Gleeds. We're a leading consultancy in the built environment with about 2,000 consultants dotted around the globe, about 800 of which in the UK. I kind of feel like I have to play the top trumps game on portfolio. So if I put all that together, I think we're running about £16 billion worth of projects at any one time.
That's why I had you on the panel last, Dave. So.
But they vary massively. So like Tim, we're a service business. So we're delivering projects for clients, and my personal aim is to improve project delivery, productivity, and client experience as wherever we possibly can, and looking at future ways of delivery is key to that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. And of course, you're welcome. And my personal thanks for you taking the time to attend this morning. What we can hear there is that there's a vast set of portfolios that are all interested in this subject, AI and project management. Just very quickly, for those that don't know Greyfly.ai, we've been in this space now, and I can't believe it, for 3 years, where we've been researching how to apply AI to project management. And as you can imagine, when we started this journey for ourselves, people sort of looked at me slightly strangely. But these days, the professional bodies that are in our industry are also talking about AI and data-driven project management, and I think increasingly a number of companies are doing that. So we personally started our journey with trying to work out why projects fail. And the thinking behind that is that once you've understood why projects fail, we can then determine which data points are the most important for us to consider gathering, and also which data points may be available. And that's what's really fueled our journey to build this intelligent project prediction tool, which basically gathers up project data and using the power of AI predicts the outcomes of projects. So that's what we're up to for Greyfly.ai. So in terms of the agenda, there are 4 key agenda items. As I said, the Q&A at the end. Very much we're going to try and make this an engaging conversation. So I'm going to try and bring my learned colleagues in, both one at a time, but also from an interactive point of view. And similarly, as an audience, like I said, if there's specific questions you want to raise, please do raise those. And I have seen that we've got one already in. So we're going to go through these questions one at a time and ask the panel for their views. And like I said, just submit your questions as you go, and hopefully these start whetting your appetite around the subject of AI and project management. But just to get us going, we're going to have the first poll, and the first poll is about the drivers for adopting AI and project management. It is binary. There's only one answer that you're allowed to put. So let's you can see the questions there. So Sam, can you just raise the first poll to the audience, and let's see what people are thinking. Thank you, Sam. Just give it another 10 seconds. Have we got most people answered, Sang?
Not yet. We need 10 more responses.
Okay, let's just give it a couple of more seconds then. Apologies for making you read such early in the morning. Okay, Sang. Let's have a look at the answers. Okay, well that's interesting in its own right that there are 2 standout answers. One about risk and decision making, and the other one about delivering projects faster and cheaper. Now, those are really interesting threads that I think may come up as we go through this conversation. I'm just going to ask the panel what their immediate views are of that. I'm not wishing to put anybody on the spot, but Dave, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. Just any immediate views in terms of that? Are you surprised?
Well, I guess two observations. One is I was in and ahhing between the projects faster and cheaper and the risk and decision making, and so I'm really not surprised that it's risk and decision making that's come out on top. But what I'm also not surprised about, but I think is fascinating, is the 0% of board pressure, and I think when we talk about some of the challenges in introducing AI into project delivery, part of the problem is that senior leaders don't really know how it is all going to work, and so therefore very limited board pressure.
Fantastic. And I guess the thing about the risks and decision making, actually it's almost an enabler to delivering projects faster in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I actually plopped for faster and cheaper, but I felt a bit dirty picking it because I didn't like the word cheaper. But it is about delivering projects, better, and so that's why I went for that one. But I think you're absolutely right. But if we focus in on the risks and key decisions, it will automatically lead to better project delivery. So yeah, good response there, I think.
Brilliant. And Tim, any views on that?
Yeah, I think much the same as Dave. It's unsurprising about board pressure. I think, from the work that you and I have been doing, Lloyd, you're aware that I almost had to drag the ball kicking and screaming, A, to understand the concept, and B, to actually invest in it. But for me, I actually pick projects faster and cheaper. We're a service business. Customers always want it quicker and they always want it cheaper. But I get it's kind of a duality in it. Risk and decision making will help drive projects faster and cheaper. So you could have picked either one of those, really. And I suppose also interestingly, existing experience was 0. So it does prove that this is kind of, fledgling stuff that we're working on.
Yeah. It's interesting your point that you say about having to really facilitate the board, and you guys are all executives of major companies, so you are almost the sponsors of this type of stuff, and for me, we're talking about AI and project management, but we could be talking about any project really here. But getting a sponsor and somebody pushing a project forward is important on any project. I presume that you guys agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely, Lloyd. I think certainly for us, the project sponsor is the key role. If you haven't got that banner carrier who's driving forward and controlling scope and controlling direction and rallying the troops to get something delivered, then it is always an uphill battle without the right level of sponsorship.
Fantastic.
And I think bravery comes into that, and having a sponsor that's willing to enter into sort of the unknown when projects are at risk. I think that's a real challenge. And so if the project sponsor's brave enough to have an open mind and explore different avenues, then actually that's where change can happen. But one of the dangers is that people just do what they already know because it's proven. So I think that existing experience piece is again, I missed that. I think it's it does show that this is a new territory.
Yeah, it's the world of innovation. Stu, do you want to just come in with your view?
Yeah, so I guess it wouldn't surprise anybody that as a corporate PMO person, I went with risks and decision making. Like others on the panel have said, I mean, the existing experience, yes, this is brand new, isn't it? I mean, not new as a concept, AI, but certainly its application in project management, less experience there. But interesting, for me, experience is kind of one of the drivers. So our lessons learned and how we apply sort of past experience into future projects is often one of the areas that we're focused on in terms of ultimately managing risk, delivering projects in a better way, etc. And what I think AI has the capability to do is to help with the decision making and the learning around sort of actively applying some of those lessons from sort of past performance in a more evidence-based way. But at the moment, it's very early days. And like Tim and David said, I mean, board pressure is just this is something that we're looking at. How do we improve internally, and then we'll definitely engage with our seniors in terms of our board, in terms of why we think that's going to have a positive impact.
Excellent. So we need an education program for our board colleagues by the sounds of that conversation. Right, I'm going to move on because there are some numerous other questions that we want to go, but thank you very much for participating in the poll, audience. So what I'm going to do is there's 2 or 3 little clustered questions together here. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give a little overview of these 3 questions from their perspective. Just because I started with Dave last time, this time I'm going to start with Tim, if that's okay. Just shout if you're not ready, Tim, and I'll go to somebody else. But if not, let's see if we take each panel member in turn. So over to you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd. So what is AI in project management? For me, I think it's certainly from our perspective, I think we measure a huge amount of history. You know, what did happen, when did it happen, and why did it happen? And what I want to do is get away from measuring history and arguing about whether the data is right or wrong, and actually get into almost decision-based data. So it becomes actionable intelligence, and it helps us drive through a huge amount of data analysis. What might happen? Where should we distort our attention and focus in terms of risks and mitigations? Because we have a large portfolio, and what we can't do is manage all of the risks and all of the issues across many projects. So for me, I think it's about understanding the right balance of what can artificial intelligence do for us. Can it take away some of the drudgery? But we shouldn't forget that you also need a healthy amount of emotional intelligence, because ultimately projects is about people and getting people to deliver outcomes. But what we do need to do is find out where AI can assist those people to make better decisions, but based on data. What does it mean for our organisation? I think we're kind of taking a 4-prong approach in terms of AI. So we're starting through our supply chain analytics and looking at all the value we can extract from the data that we hold for our many thousands of customers. Then we're now kind of breaching into that, what we call customer management cycle. So that's the pursuit of the business through the approval process internally and then into the implementation life cycle. Then what we're trying to do is actually use that and design our solutions with a data mindset from the outset. Because what we're doing at the minute is trying to do a lot of retrofit to solutions that we've designed historically. We have a plethora of systems, all of which have a huge amount of data fields. Not a lot of those are actually managed data fields. So trying to bring a global organization with circa 100 to 150 different transactional systems together and actually start to manage those data elements. And then once we've done that, we can use those AI elements into our operations to make better decisions in a business as usual life cycle, and then into our support functions, whether it be IT, HR. Can we do predictive IT maintenance rather than scheduled IT maintenance? Can we do predictive work in terms of procurement? If you look at the market, everybody's seen the steel price increase through the recent probably 6 to 12 months. Could we have used artificial intelligence to predict that, get ahead of the curve, and maybe hedge some of those things, and also then drive that into our kind of talent and acquisition life cycle? I think benefits and use cases. I think certainly for me within the project delivery function, there's a huge amount of use cases. So for me, it's about identifying the success criteria of projects in a particular shape, size, in a market sector, with particular people. Is it always this sponsor? Is it this set of people? Is it this particular project manager? Is it this type of customer where we are more successful? Then bring into that all of our lessons learned, and how do we use those to then better inform and focus in the areas that we should do. I think there are a number of other use cases that we're looking at in terms of upstream, in terms of our pursuit of customers, and how we can, so we use a shotgun approach, we are quite targeted, but how can we better target projects that are more successful in a pursuit life cycle and actually shorten that pursuit life cycle.
Excellent. So I'm just going to summarize the 3 points that jumped out from my perspective. One, you know, it's obvious, Tim, in terms of the way that you've answered that question, that you put, you know, a significant thought into data and the types of data you need and the power of that data. So from my perspective, it sounds like DHL is relatively, you know, it's beyond the starting blocks of this journey in terms of AI and project management, and I think that's reflected in your point about thinking about, well, what features are driving project success, to then actually get to talk about which projects do you pursue in the first place. Stu, what's your take on those 2 points, really, about, you know, being data-led, thinking about the features that lead to success, and choosing which projects? Do you have any views of that?
Yeah, so I suppose by way of a little bit of context first, the projects that we oversee are internally facing in the most part, although there can be audience new services being launched and that sort of thing, but they're often sort of transformation type projects, new ways of working, new buildings, change, new system introduction, that sort of thing. And whereas some of the people listening to this call might be thinking around what we do as a service offering, and we don't treat those as projects. But there is obviously a lot of AI that goes on within our products and our audience facing activity. I think in terms of the projects that I oversee, though, to your point around selection, one of the challenges we have, I think, as an organisation, is because they're internal and there's a small number of big scale projects, it's difficult to sometimes look at them in an apples for apples way, and you can have quite new sponsors, for instance, taking on quite a big change within their part of the organisation. And one of the things that we've been struggling with a little bit is, how do we get better at predicting sort of what the risk profile is of that project? How do we get better at making sure that the business cases stack up and are free of optimism bias and that sort of thing, particularly because we're spending public money in the most part, and there's a lot of scrutiny around that, and we want to make sure that we're getting best value for money. So I think for me, the AI point around how can it help us to predict the future success, where the risks are, do we have repeating stresses within the organization, whether that's our internal capacity to deliver something, or whether it's as suppliers, or particular types of projects maybe that we take on and we just, you know, either underestimate or overestimate the complexity. That's where I feel AI has a role in helping us to make better decisions about where we put resources, and be realistic about how we deploy those resources as well.
Fantastic, thank you, Stu. So really building on from the initial poll question, really, in terms of risk and identifying risk, and it's interesting that, you know, the phrase lessons learned has come up, you know, 2 or 3 times, and we're 10 minutes into the conversation. So I think, you know, point to note for everybody. Dave, do you want to, you know, either add to Tim's points raised, or you know, answer the questions from your perspective, or both, as it were?
Yeah. If I maybe go back to the questions first, because I think one of the challenges that we've got is that every project is different, and it's led by people generally, and different people have different ways of doing things. So there's no two exact scenarios in projects, and therefore when we ask about what is AI in project management, for me it's really difficult to understand where its place is in the kind of project space. I'm convinced there is a space for it and a need for it. I just don't know yet how it's really going to impact positively on project delivery. But it's all around us, and I think specifically where I sit in the construction and built environment industry, you know, we're the laggards of the UK economy in terms of productivity, and it feels like the construction industry is like the Wild West at the moment, and it's just ripe for change. So the challenge we've got is that there's loads of different ideas, concepts, you know, theories out there, and we've got to find out how it's actually going to actually benefit the projects, and how we use it to complement what our project delivery professionals do. Sorry, do you want
I was just going to say, I think it's a really interesting point. You know, the 2 points you made there. Every project is different, and we need to find real use cases. You know, to paraphrase what you said, and you know, if every project is different, then obviously that would raise the question that can you apply AI if it is that unique? And you know, just as you would expect, my challenge would be is at what level is the difference? Because certainly on a minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, every project is different. I guess if you start going up the bar and start saying, well, you know, a project has a start, a middle, and end, and you know, where do you go up that bar, and therefore, you know, which lessons can you intercept on?
Yeah. So this is so absolutely right. So there are common features in all projects that you can measure upon. The variables though in between are huge, and it comes to the point of the data that you've got to be able to use it effectively, and my struggle is that if you know, we are so heavily reliant on our project leaders that they and their input. You know, one project leader will set up a project entirely differently to another. One project leader will command a higher budget through their experience than another, and success or failure might just hinge on that one decision point at the very outset of the project. So you know, to really answer your question, what does it mean to me and our organisation? You know, I believe that there's a space for it, and I believe that it's part of our future. But I'm kind of at the moment still a little bit bemuddled in terms of what it's going to look like, and what's going to really prove to be of value.
What would it look like in your ideal world, Dave?
Well, in the ideal world, it improves our, I said right at the outset, it improves our customers' experience of project delivery, and we're delivering projects more efficiently. In you know, overall, as I said, we're if you look at, I always think about construction, I think, well, if you look at the way that you do your shopping now compared to 10 years ago, it's wildly different. If you look at how you buy a holiday now, or you decide to book your flights and your hotels and everything else, it's wildly different. You know, if you look at construction, we're probably still in teletext world, and I think that's the challenge we've got. So we've got to improve on how we do things. We've got to adopt available technology, but we've got to do it in a way that still delivers our projects and improves. And I think that's I'm going to verge on the challenges we face here, but all that means that there's no real clarity just yet on where AI sits, and you know, maybe I need to throw in the term machine learning as well, because then it might be that there's a step where we adopt more machine learning in our journey to using AI better.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And especially if you're trying to go through mountains of data, as it were, and trying to find threads of information, perhaps, you know, perhaps a human can go through mountains of data and information and find out some key decisions, key conclusions. My guess is that a high quality automated system could probably do that quicker and do it more dynamically as well. That's notwithstanding you know, the wider point that you made, which is building the machine in the first place and making sure that it's you know, reaching sensible conclusions. But you know, you would think the power of the computer could do things quicker if you've got the data, as it were.
Yeah, and that's my point about yeah, maybe I've got my terminology wrong, but using the data to identify trends and hotspots and issues to feed the decision-making process. You know, I can absolutely see a space right now that's clearly defined. Going the next step to actually, you know, to ask my project managers to trust a decision made by data alone. I think I just can't currently see it right now, and so that's, I think, part of the journey that we've got to go on is, where does it sit, how does it inform people, what's the role of it, you know, what's the role of a project leader going forward.
Excellent.
I'd echo that, Dave. I'm very conscious with all of these conversations when I get involved with things that are in the sort of process and tools space, that they can always help. There's something definitely in this that we need to exploit, but projects are about people, and certainly our experiences are always about how you take people with you, how you get sponsors engaged, and all those sort of well-known challenges of getting projects delivered. And AI in its own right is not going to deliver the projects better. AI helping decisions, giving you better evidence to support conversations with sponsors or to help get the right resources available to your project, I think does have a place. But like Dave says, I think it's fledgling, and we need to work out how to integrate that into governance better, basically.
So augmenting, I think, is the phrase that I've read over the last few years, augmenting decision making. And also the other key thread I can hear from you guys there is it's a change management piece. You know, you need to bring sponsors, you need to bring project managers, you need to bring those people involved in projects forward on this journey around AI and project management. So again, you know, from my perspective, I start thinking that's similar to how you'd manage a good transformation project in its own right. So I think there's some really good points there. Stuart, I'm conscious that I haven't asked you those specific questions. Is there any additional points that you want to make on those?
So I think I've probably covered it mostly. I mean, for me, we came into this because we have this small portfolio of big hairy projects, and not always all of the skills in house to initially tackle them. And so, how do we better understand that risk profile? How do we better take forward our decision making? And so I remember one of the early conversations you and I had, Lloyd, it was, you know, is there a way that we could use this technology to give us some support, augmented, like you say, in terms of looking at trends and the likelihood of success for different types of projects? So we've got a portfolio, it's not 100 similar types of projects where we can look at sort of the data and say, we can predict where they're going to go wrong. We've got different types, apples and pears, all over the place. So how do we get a better understanding? And I think somebody in the chat has actually asked, you know, or one of the questions, is there an opportunity to share data? And I do think that that's where AI and this sort of thinking could potentially get really valuable, is when you start to say, anonymized, there's a broader set of information out there in the industry about different types of activity, and and how well they succeed, and where they tend to have troubles, and is there something therefore to be learnt that can be applied, where a machine learning piece can determine for your project and your parameters what's likely to happen, and whether that's going to be successful or not. And again, it's only ever going to be a predictor, right? There's got to be a human in the loop. There's got to be a project professional in the loop that's actually saying, yes, but these are the actual unique challenges to this project.
I saw the question about sharing knowledge as well, and I think it's a really interesting question. Certainly in the public sector, that there are already moves afoot to be able to share more data across public bodies. Whether commercial companies will be willing to share data, I think is maybe a more trickier question. However, again, I think it sort of goes back to Dave's point, which is at what level the data is at to be able to share it, and also, that data has to be trusted. It has to be real data to be able to share, and it's quite hard to govern that data to make sure it is trusted to be able to share. So there is something about sharing. However, I'm conscious of time, and there was just one more question on this.
Lloyd,
yeah, of course.
Just on that data sharing piece, because I think it's really, really important. So, it is a real problem. Like the not just your own data, because even if you've got loads of it, you might not be harnessing it properly, and that's one of the journeys that we as a business have to improve upon, which is we've got all these projects in construction, yet trying to get a consistent set of data to use effectively it is a real challenge. So even if you've got a big portfolio of projects, you might not have the data still. And then as someone put in the chat, not everyone has that access to data, and therefore with a limited data pool, it's really hard to use the information effectively. So there are initiatives out there that are looking to improve on that. So in my world, you've got the Construction Data Trust that's starting to gather momentum, and major firms such as Gleeds are signing up to sharing their data for the benefit of driving the algorithms that will improve project delivery, and so there is a tension and nervousness about it, but companies have just got to get over it and start sharing, and then reaping the benefit from that shared community, and not you can't keep hold of it and then expect to thrive yourself. We're going to need to collaborate with partners and then use it wisely as appropriate. So there are moves afoot to sort of create a much larger data pool out there.
Yeah, and I guess there's a risk of missing out as well. If your company doesn't engage, and other companies in your sector are engaging with that type of push, then you are going to be left behind, and no doubt, I don't know, something like B Corp, where you might actually, miss out with commercial opportunities if you're not part of something as well. So definitely a point there about data sharing. However, it sounds like that is a stepped and longer term journey, and one of the things I want to get into shortly is about the real benefits of how do we get on with this now. Last question, which was across the panel. Now I think Dave did the construction industry a bit of a disservice earlier, sorry Dave, about the maturity of this data-led journey. From what I've seen, and I engage with companies in lots of different sectors, construction have a long history of PMO type functions where there is lots and lots of data. So my general view is that construction may be ahead of other industries in this space, but in terms of the use journey, the use case, I wonder whether the panel agree that broadly speaking, the use case is the same in all sectors. So remind you, it's about that risk identification of risk and driving projects faster and more economical rather than cheaper. Do people agree that the challenge is the same across sectors?
I think if you take it at its generic level, which is you trying to deliver a desired outcome most efficiently and at the most desired cost, then probably yes, it is the same, irrespective of what sector. I think there are individual nuances within sectors that will change, but again, that's what level do you take that data at? So if you anonymise it enough and take it to the top level, yes, it could be the same across all sectors. And the more data you plug into that at the anonymised level, I think the better the level of prediction. But when you start to drill into more lower level data, I think it will absolutely differ sector by sector.
Okay, excellent. So there's back to that level of data point that has come up before. Dave, Stuart, any points from you in terms of, is it different by sector?
So I was going to say, as Tim said, yeah, we're all ultimately seeking the right outcomes from our business case, right, and the right benefits. So, and we all know also from the research the common reasons projects fail. So, yeah, those things are sort of constants, aren't they, wherever you are. I think though, the application of project management, the maturity of the organization, the outcomes it's seeking, whether they're sort of very tangible or intangible, all play a part. And certainly from our own experiences of sort of the trials we've had so far, we've got bags of information, but it's not necessarily in a way that I would call it real data, and we'll probably come on to that in the next question. But so I don't know that it's, I would say that it's different per sector, but it's absolutely different by setting or organization or experience, because there are factors around process and ways of working that need to be considered as well.
Dave, any take from you?
Well, I think the challenges across sectors are the same, but there are some very different worlds. So in construction, you can't afford to fail, right? You can't build it twice or three times. You've got to get it right. So, but in the R&D world, failing quickly is important. And so when I think about using AI in project management, and the reason why, well, I was interested in working with you all those months ago, Lloyd, was about, I saw the benefit in increasing project predictability and informing project outcomes earlier, and so that would be a positive for any industry in any sector at any project. The earlier you know what the likely outcomes are going to be, the more chance you can do something about it and improve the eventual outcome. I'm still watching. I'm still got that 80% of projects fail quote on in front of me, and it's just so depressing, isn't it? And I really want to challenge it, but I know it comes from a good source. For me, it's all about setting up the projects right, and I think that's where the AI has the biggest bang for its buck, and that would be the same in all sectors, I think.
Yeah, and obviously a statement like that, you need to unpick it as well in terms of the 80% point. So broadly, we're saying at a certain level, it doesn't matter which sector, the use cases are similar. Now, I'm conscious that we've got a couple of questions that have come up in the chat, but having said that, in one I made earlier, I think that those questions are going to be addressed directly as we go through this conversation. So hopefully for those people that have raised them, you're going to see the answers shortly. So in terms of readiness, you can see the question here is about what are the key components you need to put in place, and we'll come back about the risks and benefits as we go, although I think we are covering them as we go. Who would like to go first to talk about the key components, guys? Any volunteers, or shall I nominate again? Is it Stuart's turn to go first?
I think it's my turn, isn't it? So for me, certainly from the experiences we've had and the conversations we've had over the time, Lloyd, consistency was the word that probably came to mind for me in terms of key components, because you need a level of consistency across your management, across your language, the processes and the information that you're handling if you're going to successfully sort of harness that predictability point that Dave was saying, and that's certainly something that, you know, we're on a journey of needing to look at. How do we, you know, at the lowest level, how do you get the information into a usable, consistent way, but going up the tree, how do you make sure that your delivery teams are therefore setting their projects up in a near enough consistent manner that the information that's coming through is usable, and how do you then make sure that that's supported by ways of working and governance at the top of the shop that sort of takes on board what that information is telling you.
And I can imagine at times, Stuart, that's quite a hard challenge for any company. You know, you've got a project that's worth multi-million pounds, you know, run by some, you know, program director who's paid a lot of money to make that project a success, sponsored by a board person, maybe in a different division, and you know, you as a function may be saying, oh, you know, just apologies for the language, but can you just fill in this form in this way, and you know, make sure that's consistency. Is there a challenge around that type of stuff?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know the others' experiences on the panel. I mean, certainly within our organisation, you've got there's always a tension between the sort of the desire for clear oversight and clarity, and we talk in terms of delivery confidence, and the tension with people that are charged with delivering those activities in terms of needing to do it their way, or the inability to get the resources that they feel they need, that sort of thing. So there's always tension in delivery, isn't there, in terms of what needs to be done and what can be, you know, what best practice would say you should do versus what you need to actually do to get the job done. And sometimes those things are at odds. And obviously, you talked about this in terms of a change management piece earlier, Lloyd, and if I turned around to the organisation and said, oh, well, from tomorrow you all need to fill in this form in this particular way because it allows us to harness our AI capability better, you know, we would have, you know, immediate tissue rejection. So you know, you've got to be able to demonstrate the benefits, move forwards, and slowly build the capability in terms of that more consistent way of working, I think.
And I guess that's a challenge, whether you're talking about AI and project management, or whether you're talking about implementing, you know, standard project control processes, no matter what, Stuart.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, this conversation could be just as applicable to a conversation around risk or standard reporting, or you know, systems to help you deliver change. And I suppose, you know, the old adage of rubbish in, rubbish out is a very real practical problem here as well. It's all very well you can set the expectation, but if people aren't seeing the benefit for themselves, or the wrong behaviours come down the track as a result, you know, yeah, I put the correct data in, it tells me that there's a problem coming and I get penalised for that, then you're going to get unactionable information, as somebody said earlier in the session.
Excellent. So from Stuart's perspective, in terms of key components, it's all about the process and people following those processes. Tim, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'll probably echo some of Stuart's comments in terms of you've got to take people on the journey. You know, if we tried to change process, you know, instantly, we would have a huge amount of pushback. And we always have, you know, the kind of the tension between operations who want to lead from the front and drive something in, whereas, you know, we're trying to act with and be the conscience of the business to make sure that it's done appropriately and through a proper governance cycle using a proper methodology. And you've always got that tension of, I want to do it quicker, and we're saying, well, there's a best practice way to do it. For me, you know, it's about span of control. In terms of what are some of the key components, you've got to have the remit to be able to control the process of the implementation lifecycle. I think once you've got that, you can start to drive some commonality in terms of what are the key things that you need to pick up and report on. And then you've got to have, I suppose, that mindset that wants to interrogate new and different ways. And and have the backup using kind of AI to speak the truth. We spend a lot of time in our business about speaking the truth, and not, I think somebody mentioned it earlier, not, you know, giving a rose-tinted view on life. We have to speak the truth. And what I think AI will help us do is be able to back that up in terms of some, you know, proper conformed data points, as opposed to, you know, subjective experience based on huge amounts of years of data.
Excellent. So far we've got, it's about process, it's about people in terms of change management, in terms of responsibility for process and people, and also to have an innovative mindset. Dave, any other components to add to that?
No, I was just ticking off my list as you actually read it out.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, the three things I had was the consistent data, the open mind, and the real benefits. And you know, I've already experienced, you know, too many conversations where, you know, project managers are kind of dismissing new ways of working because they don't believe that it's going to change anytime soon, and that you know, how could it help them, you know, and so having that open mind and that and clearly defined benefits of adopting new ways of working is going to be key to the journey. And actually, you know, like Stuart and Tim say, you know, it's a change over time. It's a shift that's going to take time to adopt. I don't think there's a big bang moment. I think it's going to be a progressive journey into use of more available technology, and I think it's important that there are people pushing the boundaries, but it's also important to recognise that it's not going to be something that changes overnight, that it's going to be something that's introduced over time.
I think the only one I had on my list that I was thinking about, and maybe I would, you know, working in a tech company, is just the infrastructure, building the technical infrastructure in the, you know, in parallel to the process, to the change management, to the people. And you know, sometimes depending on what technical infrastructure we're talking about, whether AI is standalone, AI in project management is standalone, or it's part of a wider piece around digital transformation, for want of a better term, then that infrastructure probably needs planning and strategizing as well. And then, you know, that relationship with data as well. So thank you for that, guys. That's some really good insight there. Just following that up, again, you know, within the bounds of commercial sensitivity, where are you at with your company? Dave, do you want to start this one?
Well, I think we recognise that we're not as far as we should be, but in reality, I think we're further along the journey than a lot of our peers. Yeah, we're quite self-critical, and you know, we've been collecting data for a long time, but yet when we wanted to collect it for a particular reason, we found lots of shortcomings in it. We have a specific team that are now fully focused on our digital transformation, and we've set a 4-year plan to change the way that our business operates, and you know, so we are driving forward a number of initiatives. But my problem is, you know, I talk to the individuals at project delivery level, and we talk about new ways of working and being fit for the future, and being relevant for projects in 4 to 5 years time, and they glaze over and look at me blankly to kind of say, well, you know, this is a new language that you're trying to get me to adopt, and you know, some people just aren't interested. And I think that's the so I think corporately we're ready for a change and we recognize the need for it, but bringing the team along the journey is the kind of the sort of challenge we have. And that's not doing my project managers a disservice. That's just a reality of where people are in life. You know, they know how to deliver a project. Changing it is a risk, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's got echoes of change management in there as well, isn't it? You know, in terms of how do you bring people with you? So, and it's fantastic to hear that you know, you as an organisation have been thinking about this in the wider piece of the digital transformation, as I expect, you know, other companies are as well. And if they're not quite as far ahead as Gleeds, they're you know, they're inquiring and starting to contemplate, how do I move this forward. So Dave, just to circle that back, does that mean you've got high level sponsorship in Gleeds for this piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got a project sponsor who sits on the executive management board, who's driving that broader digital transformation piece, and it's you know, it's a global thing, not UK specific.
Okay, excellent. I'm just going to bring Stuart in, because I know he's going to drop out and come back in a moment. So just one question then, Stuart, in terms of the, you know, from a BBC perspective, where are you at in this journey, as it were?
So I think in terms of a bit like Dave, we've got a wider plan that is around transformation, the organisation's transformation, and how we support that, how we ensure that there's good visibility, the right resources are going into the right activities, capabilities there to support that, whether it's at a delivery level or a sponsorship level. So that there's a whole raft of things that we're doing to support delivery more generally. I think within that, AI as a concept, we're at a pilot and sort of curiosity level, really. So bearing in mind how we operate and the levels of information we've got and those sorts of things, we're keen to explore what its role in sort of future decision making can be. But even by being in those early conversations, and that curiosity has led to changes that we've made in terms of the sort of data that we collect and how we start to think about that, and what our, you know, what our ask of different projects is, so that as we start to move forward, we're collecting a better understanding of activity in a more consistent way, to the point I made earlier. But we're doing it almost behind the scenes, baby steps, rather than as some big visible we're changing, because that, you know, to the change management point of view, that there are many other strands that we need to focus on at the same time, and there's always competing demands.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? When you know, the demands of today's projects, you know, as opposed to longer term capabilities, always going to be a, you know, a trade-off and a challenge. Tim, from your perspective, you know, from what you said earlier, it sounded like you're reasonably along this journey as well.
Yeah, I think certainly from a, you know, what I would call a project management execution level, you know, there's a number of like-minded individuals like myself who are leading project delivery in different regions across the globe. We've collectively agreed that, you know, there is a place for AI in project delivery. We just don't know fundamentally where it sits yet. But we said that one region should pilot it, so we're piloting it. What I've found in our business is the best way to convince somebody is to actually show them something, rather than try and sell them a dream. So, you know, that's why we're hence moving into this area, working with yourself, Lloyd, to actually evidence something. And then I think it's a much simpler conversation. We're also working with a global team that have been set up, which is, you know, kind of data by design. And they're kind of starting right at the outset of the pursuit phase and starting to put all the data elements in place, all the structure, and then eventually, you know, that will kind of stream down into the execution element of the project as well. But we're just making sure that we keep closely aligned. But in terms of AI and, you know, across our business, it's being adopted and deployed quite widely. But within, you know, the project management area, you know, we're the kind of first movers, as it were.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point that you talk about in terms of evidence-based, and you know, being on the other end of that, I think, you know, it's certainly something that I think would be valuable to anybody who's interested in this area, which is, you know, show me the benefits. What are the tangible benefits? And, you know, having those case studies that you can share with your, you know, directors, as it were, or your executives rather, I think really does help setting up a project, and especially a project of this type of nature that is innovation. And you know, we're not quite sure what the benefits would be and all of that sort of stuff. So I think, you know, being able to do a pilot and having a pilot that does show evidence of that show me, I think would be extremely powerful to any company, as it were. Okay, let me just see if there are any. One of the questions from the floor was about pertinence to different types of projects. Are they more pertinent compared to others? You know, is this in the space of large projects or only, or, you know, mega projects, you know, infrastructure type projects, I would guess, or is this in the space, you know, can you equally apply this to smaller types projects? Now, I'm going to ask Tim to start that conversation, if that's okay. So, Tim, do you see a certain type of project benefiting more than others in this space?
Possibly, yes. I mean, you know, short, snap emergency projects, you probably haven't got time to sit down and, you know, analyze data and trends that are coming out of it. But I think where it would apply to all is in that kind of what goes into the funnel. So using the data coming out of everything to actually be better armed around, well, should we actually do this or not? So I think it applies, you know, equally there. But, you know, I think if you're looking for more structured, longer term benefits, I think, yeah, kind of, you know, larger programs of events is where I think it really comes into its own, because you've got the time to actually understand what's coming out, but also it then allows you to trigger that into a governance life cycle. And you can take some of those learnings and drive them into the kind of heartland of projects, as opposed to the, you know, the emergency, you know, you've got 2 days to set this up, crack on.
So from your perspective, you know, there could be benefits on all types of projects. Dave, from your view?
I don't know, when I saw that come up in the chat, I thought I was quite intrigued by it, and I mean, the reality is I don't know. I you know, definitely agree with Tim's point about the kind of fast, snappy emergency projects just needing to get done. But even still, if we're really going, if AI becomes a consistent factor in project delivery, then it should therefore benefit all projects, because it's easy and quick and automated, and you don't have to think much about it. You know, you put the data in, you get some information out. I just don't know yet where it's going to be. I mean, it goes back to that point about, you know, what do we mean by AI in project management? What is it going to look like? And I don't yet know how it's going to help, and therefore I don't know what projects it will benefit for most. What I do know is, over time, anything that's new that's brought to industry tends to be led by the major programs and becomes business as usual over time, and the smaller projects and the smaller companies, you know, adopt it later on down the line because it's business as usual. And so that it'll probably be the case that we'll see more evidence of it being used in the larger mega or major project space, because there's the resources to do it. But, you know, for those who work in the construction world, you know, I think BIM is now 10 years old, and it's only just really finding its way into the sort of mainstream private sector projects. And so, you know, it could be 10 years before AI is fully adopted all over the place, providing benefit to everyone rather than just a small area.
Excellent, thank you.
Speculative views there, of course.
Yeah, I thank you for that, Dave. I'm really conscious that I haven't asked Stuart on this particular question, but I'm also conscious that time is actually moving really fast. So I'm actually going to go to the next page of questions. But one question that's come up in the chat from Aidan, I think is fantastic, which is, are we thinking about the organisation structure will have to change as a result of implementing AI in project management? You know, are you thinking, you know, new PMOs, centralising with new capability, new functions, maybe a data science function? Any views on that from anybody?
Yeah, it's interesting that it's driven quite a lot of change in our world, even to the point where we don't call it a PMO anymore. It's called a PCO, or Project Capability Office, and it has driven a lot of change. So we moved all of our central resourcing into our PMO, so they now control the project management resources, because they need access to that resource data, that skill matrix, and that capability. And we have built a small fledgling, you know, set of data people within our PCO. So that all that data is driven through a central point of view, which is our PCO. So I think it has certainly changed the way that I structure my team moving forward.
Fantastic. So you know, more of that PCO, PMO type central overview function, but with added capability. Yeah. Sounds like. And Dave, do you see that being similar in your area? Sorry, Stu, I should come to you next.
Yeah, I think I mean there's things we're doing at organisational level that are new. So we've now got our own data academy, because we recognise the need to bring people onto the journey. We've got an insight and analytics team, and we're also introducing what we're calling project and information managers to recognise the sort of more digital way of delivering things. So organisationally there's some change, I think you know that what I don't see the change in projects needing a project leader and technical inputs and the same support. So I don't see a massive change in the project structure, but I do see the role of the project manager changing in what they do over the next few years.
Cool. Okay, Stu, anything from you on this point?
So I think I was just going to link to the last point, actually. So if AI becomes a sort of transparent layer on top of the information we've already got, then it shouldn't really matter that much the size of the project. I think it's got value in the portfolio space, particularly where there's repeated type projects around the optimization of that. And I suppose to the resourcing point, we're seeing, you know, a drive to have better information across more projects, but with fewer people, and efficiency is always at the heart of a lot of those questions. And so I think it's with that in that sort of context that AI may lead to ability to do more stuff with fewer people, and therefore yes, some change could come. But at this point in time, we're not sort of to echo other points, I don't see it as massively changing the actual project delivery structure.
It's really good. Stu, do you want to just continue on to this question that I just brought on screen about why do you think businesses hesitate?
So, well, I think we've seen it in this conversation, haven't we? It's fledgling. It's difficult to pin a tail onto as to exactly what do we mean by this. The capability, we intuitively feel that there's something there, but we haven't yet had chance to really demonstrate harness the benefit there. I think somebody in the chat said that, you know, have we seen changes because of it? And certainly from my experience, not yet, because we're very much still in the pilot. Yeah, there is difficulty, I think, in terms of that quantifying the benefit at this point in time. But I think as it becomes more mainstream, a bit like the BIM point that Dave made, you know, it will take some time, but then it should become pretty ubiquitous, and I suspect we will all sort of question how we did it without it in a few years' time.
Excellent, excellent. Tim, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think I'll just echo some of Stuart's comments. People are trying to understand, where does it apply? How do you apply it? What's the use case for it? So I think that will be one of the reasons why people hesitate. I think the other one would be trying to win hearts and minds inside a business to actually invest in it. And then probably because some people may think, we haven't got a really big data set, it's not going to be meaningful, or actually we've got really bad quality data. Now, I went into the pilot with you guys thinking that we had pretty good quality data and lots of data points, and we do, but some of the integrity of that data is pretty woeful, as we've found out. So I think that's probably another reason why people hesitate to explore it, thinking that my data is not good enough, it probably won't give me any benefits.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I certainly think that some companies may see that as a blocker completely, in terms of the data ready. That's almost, loops back into Stuart's point earlier about implementing process in a standard way, and that being bedded in, and then building up a bank of data and all of that sort of stuff. So there's a number of challenges around that data, and I think it's then about showing demonstrable benefits and tangible case studies with real benefits, as it were. So
and I think it's trying to change people's mindsets around the value of data, because people have had it for years and years. It's just been consumed and used in various different pockets, and you kind of stack it up until the point you can actually get rid of it from a regulatory perspective. But nobody's truly understood the value that they possess within that data. When you bring it all together and anonymize it and start to look at the interdependency, I think trying to change people's mindset around data is almost like a new currency.
Yeah. So data first and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Dave, what's your take on this conversation?
I don't think I can add much what Stuart and Tim have said already. I'm coming from a business point of view where we are exploring AI, so perhaps I've got some naivety in terms of businesses that wouldn't. I can certainly add to some barriers if you want.
Yeah, just add those, because again, guys, I'm really conscious that it's 10:15, and Dave, if you want to also, as well as the barriers, maybe lead into that last action, last question rather as well.
Yeah, well, I think we've covered a lot of the barriers already, and I think the reality is that we probably throw away 90% of our data at the end of a project, and actually if we keep that and use it better, then that would be the simplest sole action that we could take to enable us to adopt available technologies as they come to market. I think data, the quality and size of data pool is both the barrier and the action required. Certainly from Gleeds' point of view, the fact that we've got a really diverse range of projects with a diverse range of clients all doing things in a slightly different way, I think it is a challenge that we'll need to overcome. But I think I don't think it's as significant as getting the data in the first place. And what staggers me is that we've been talking about data collection for years and years. Before AI, it was key performance indicators, for example. The only way to do key performance indicators is to collect data in a consistent way. So like Tim says, I kind of knew that our data was poor, but it shouldn't have been, and it should have been better. And it's the exercise we've done with you guys has really highlighted the need to really think hard about the data that we want, and then store that so we can start using it in the future.
So that whole data first, getting on with that, and it sounds like you know, Rome wasn't built in a day in this space as well, guys. That you know, the quicker you start, the quicker you get on with it and work out what data you need, and you know, the supporting processes to create that data, and coupled with a change management piece. Any other practical actions, Dave?
I think the you know, we've got to identify, you know, we talked about it already as well, we've got to identify real benefits for changing the way we do things. So it's not just a few people banging the drum and trying to convince people that, you know, there's got to be some real benefits. So I really liked what Tim was saying, that, you know, he's going down a route where they're going to prove it, so the conversation becomes easier. You know, that, you know, finding that real case study, I think is going to be really important to changing the mindset of people who are you know, might be resistant to change.
Excellent.
I'm always worried about talking about people being resistant to change when they're project managers, but yeah, that's the reality of it.
Yeah, brilliant. Stu, from your point of view, in terms of practical action, sorry, I keep pinging on the screen, guys. Apologies for that.
Well, so for us, so certainly our experiences thus far, you know, we've got to look at availability and consistency of the information, also the reliability of that. So
yeah, so again, to echo that point about data, as it were, and having real examples. Tim, anything from your perspective in terms of practical actions?
Practical actions, I think, is identify your key data elements and identify what that data field means, and then appoint somebody as an owner. Because with ownership, you will get commonality, you will harmonize it, you'll get a better understanding of it. And then I suppose the most practical action is get off the pot and do something about it. Even if you think your data is not good enough, what doing something about it will mean is it'll either validate it, or actually you'll find that your data is not as bad as you think it is. Yeah, you can sit there and wait until you've got a 100% beautiful, clean data set, but you've been doing it for years. Yeah. You've actually got to dive in and work through it.
And possibly, you know, if there are benefits to be had, start unlocking those benefits sooner as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But when you just go back to your point about own the data, what are you thinking about there?
So, I mean, when you look at an opportunity that runs through our life cycle, we did some analysis recently. We all the way from first contact all the way through to, you know, operating it, we collect 6,500 odd data elements of an opportunity as it runs through its life cycle. Now, you clearly don't need to have ownership of all of those, but there will be 50 to 60 key data elements, and you need somebody to own it. Like you would have a core business process, somebody needs to own that process. They need to be responsible for it, they need to update it, they need to continuously improve that. We're taking the approach of data is no different to a process. If you have somebody who owns it and has an affinity with it and controls it, then A, you've got a point of reference, and B, you will start to improve the integrity of that and the knowledge of it.
And that type of owner, is that a sort of PMO or PCO type ownership space, or are you thinking somewhere else in an organization?
Yes and no. You know, we will have a number that are owned globally because, you know, they're globally defined as important data fields. We will have some that are PCO owned, but we also have some that we've, you know, identified a number of like-minded project managers within our community who will own that particular data element and drive improvement in.
Excellent. Now, I'm really conscious of time, and we've sort of sizzled through this conversation. I was going to bring the poll up. Just before I do that, any other last practical actions from Dave? I think Stuart's just rebooting his machine. I just had a message. So
get ahead of regulation. I think, as we found, Lloyd, you know, there are certain regulations that can, I wouldn't say kill a bad idea, but water down a great idea. So, you know, particularly things like GDPR, really understand the implications of data and data fields and what you can and cannot do with things like GDPR, because it can water down the efficiency of what you might get.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, Dave, any other practical actions from your perspective? Well,
I think from an organisation point of view, you've got to create the space and the time to explore this in the first instance. If you haven't done so in your organisation, you've got to make it okay to spend some time in exploring new ways of working, because one thing I'm sure of is that every business will have a different benefit from adopting the newer ways of working and adopting AI. So it's really easy to get just carry on doing what you're doing. I think you need to create the space, create a team, find some people who really care about it, look, and then challenge yourself. And Tim's absolutely right. You've got to. I remember the saying said to me once, you've got to get off the nail. So just get be brave and make the space to really consider how you might be able to improve the ways that you do things.
Fantastic. Well, chaps, thank you so much. Hopefully Stuart will reappear in 1 second. Let's just put this poll up quickly, Sang. Maybe there should be an F here, which is tangible benefits, as it were. But if people can just respond to that poll, I'll just give you a minute or so, and then we'll just chat through the answers. We're heading towards the closure, as it were. Okay, Sang, have you got the responses in?
Couple more seconds, please.
Okay, let's bring up the answers then, Sang. Okay, we've got more of a spread on this one. Process and data maturity, which sort of echoes some of the conversation we've been having there. Dave, any take? Which way did you go, Dave?
Well, I didn't. I was looking long and hard at the options, and I couldn't pick one. And
it's because I speeded up the project, though.
You clicked the poll on me. I think the reality is it's missing the one that I was really looking for, which is about the kind of proof of concept and where the value sits. And this is coming from someone who hears about it a lot and wants to be open to it, but I really struggle still seeing where that real value sits and what the answer looks like. So
tangible outcomes showing tangible benefit, which F.
I'll go for F.
Excellent. Which is really something that obviously putting these questions together we didn't see. So fantastic feedback. Tim, from you.
So I kind of went process maturity, probably because it's one of the hardest things to change, particularly if you've got a motor that's running. Trying to take part of it out and re-engineer it and then plug it back in and get people to adopt it quickly is one of the hardest things, certainly in our business. So that's, I'm not surprised that process maturity and data maturity are there. I think probably process maturity is the more difficult one. I think data you can adapt, you can change, you can insert new data fields. But absolutely, and I probably, I would think people capability would also be another one, but not in terms of data scientists and Power BI specialists, but people who have a free enough mindset to be able to investigate what if. Not constrained by traditional process thinking.
Fantastic. And Stuart, are you on the call?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, so I actually ticked project maturity because I think I panicked. I was looking at the maturity ones and trying to decide which one. But I think I was coming at it probably not from a sort of individual project perspective, because I think we have some excellent experience within the organisation, but I think from a more organisation-wide perspective and maturity across all of our sort of portfolio and project settings as an enabler, if you like, to have consistent processes and consistent data, and also for that to then flow into governance in a way that it actually affects decision making.
Yeah, I think in a way the project maturity is a bit of a cheat because it's a sort of catch-all for everything below, isn't it? So great answers. Now, thank you so much for that, guys. So it's 25 past. In terms of a single question from the audience, I've been looking as we go on all of this stuff, and I think the vast majority of questions that we've posed, is there anybody in the audience that feels there's one specific question that needs to be answered in the last couple of minutes? If so, just pop it in the chat. You know, what's the one thing that you're left like we haven't adequately covered? Just give people 10 seconds. Oh, sorry, you could probably raise a hand, as it were. Thank you, Sang. Anybody want to raise a hand for a final question? Any hand raisers?
Lloyd, I see that Shane has put in a new question about next steps for data sharing. And
okay, yes. Do you want to just cover that off, Dave?
Well, I mentioned earlier that certainly in the construction world, we've got construction data trust that's starting to gather pace. I don't know what other sectors are doing, but there's clearly there are barriers to data sharing that people are nervous about, the ownership of the data, the giving away of IP. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think we've got to be brave, and we've got to recognise that this is not a time for holding on to data. We've got to share it. We've got to get common benefit, and then improve the way we do things as a project profession. And you know, so if you know whatever industry you're in, try and search out for the people who are trying to push those boundaries. There's certainly some platforms and some communities that are driving data in a non-sector specific way. So try and search them out.
Excellent. Well, there's thank you for that, Dave. There's been, I can't see anybody's raised any hands or anything, but so on that note, I'm probably going to wrap up and deliver this project slightly early and you know, be against the grain of that initial point. So first of all, just thank you from me, Dave, Tim, Stuart. Thank you for making this a really great discussion. In terms of next steps, as I said, it's an inaugural discussion, so we will be seeking feedback to see what people think, to see whether we gave you some valuable insights and maybe any threads. If there's any particular points that from an audience that you don't feel we covered that we need to cover, just feel free to email me and chat that through. But just to say thank you panel, and thank you audience, and we're now going to bring this conversation to an end and stop recording. So have a great day and have a great week, everybody.